forget about me. I mean, he talks terribly about so many other people, including our international partners, our allies, not to mention, people across the country, anybody that disagrees with him, really. And I really believe that we've got to get back to a state of, disagreeing without being disagreeable in this country. But unfortunately, he's modeling really bad behavior.
Welcome to Independent Americans, and welcome back to Alabama, Rocket City, Alabama, just outside of Huntsville, where I am right now at a game for maybe the coolest mascotted team in minor league baseball, the Rocket City Trash Pandas. The Trash Pandas, people. That's what this team is called. They are a AA affiliate of the California Angels. We're here to watch a game against, who are they playing? The Knoxville Smokies, the Tennessee Smokies. That's what they're playing. But it's an awesome minor league experience. It's a great piece of America in the summer. And I'm bringing you another episode. It's one that I hope helps take you through this summer of craziness with some light to contrast the heat. Speaking of heat, down here in Alabama, it feels like 101 degrees. Reminds me of what it was like when I was stationed down here. But it's crazy time. I hope I continue to bring you information you can use, help you stay ahead of the curve, and some light and some positivity in this time of political division. It's a wild summer, but I'm going to keep trying to keep you ahead of what's next. Be sure to subscribe, download and share and rate. Go to YouTube, whether you're in California, Alabama, Alaska, wherever you are. Check us out and keep spreading the word. This movement continues to grow thanks to all your support. This is a Trash Panda bouncy castle. Like, is that not the coolest mascot ever? The Trash Panda. Oh, you don't know Trash Panda? It is kind of it's a raccoon. It's another name for a raccoon. It's slang for a raccoon. And the Trash Pandas are right now down 1-0 to the Smokies. America has been down lately, but we're trying to find some light this summer. Minor league baseball, family, summer. Squeeze it out. Keep finding that joy because joy is a form of resistance. So here it is, another episode of Independent Americans from Trash Panda Central, Rocket City, USA. Stay vigilant and go Trash Pandas. Independent Americans around the country and around the world. Welcome to Independent Americans. Of course, I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. This week, I am coming to you from Rocket City, USA, Huntsville, Alabama, where it's about 100 degrees and feels about 120. I am here all week for space camp with my boys and lots of other stuff. We've got a guest today that's a rocket ship of a different kind. He's a Democrat, but a man who has a unique appeal to independence and to our community and wants to help Democrats reach them more. He's coming off of a WNBA All-Star game, opening the Obama Presidential Library, and getting smeared by Trump in a uniquely disgusting and Trumpian way. But this week especially, he's going to bring some insight, some perspective, some leadership, and in the spirit of NASA that I'm going to bring you all week, he's going to bring you the 5 eyes that I bring you: independence, integrity, information, inspiration, and impact. And he's going to help us stay vigilant. He is the governor of the great state of Illinois, a man who is not afraid to speak truth to power, stand up to Trump and his own party. Appearing for the first time on Independent Americans, the great and powerful Governor JB Pritzker. Welcome, Governor.
Hey, Paul, great to see you and really excited to be on the show with you.
It's really great to see you. I always ask everybody to start, where are you and how are you? But you had a heck of a weekend. You were pretty busy. I assume you're still in the Chicagoland area, but where are you and how are you?
I am. We hosted the WNBA All-Stars game here. It was tremendous. I mean, frankly, the city lit up and I was at the game. It was a great game. And it was an all-star cast there. Of course, we got NBA players. We had the commissioner of the NBA. We got WNBA former players, some of the best of all time. And it was a terrific weekend, loving it, and love that all of our bars and restaurants were full over the weekend across Chicago.
It's a good time to be in Chicago. White Sox are looking good. You got the new library. You and President Obama bringing people together. We need some positivity this summer. I feel like your town, especially, has been bringing it.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, we had a great opening of the Obama Center. Was, by the way, bipartisan. I want to give some credit for, there were a number of Republicans who came just to, just frankly to pay their respects to a former president. There was former President Bush there. We had former Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood, who's from Illinois, was there, and a number of others. Really, I'm proud that, people are willing to kind of cross party lines for something that really isn't a partisan endeavor. It's a presidential library. I've been to presidential libraries for Republicans and Democrats. This is, by the way, the best one that I've ever seen. And I don't mean that in a partisan way. It's just really well done.
It looks like it because it's about community, right? And it's got a basketball court. It's a place people want to go to more than once, right? It really feels like a place to bring people together at a time when especially young people need inspiration, need leadership, and need community.
And it's on the south side of Chicago in an area that kind of needed some economic development. So President Obama really felt strongly that it should be there. And it is lifting up. That you can feel it in the whole community. There's development that's going on around it. And as you said, there are basketball courts there. There's a library that's there, a public library. So people are coming there just as a kind of a community center, in addition to it being really one of the great presidential libraries.
So maybe almost indirect. A lot I want to get to with you. I want to talk about the National Guard. I want to talk about independence. I want to talk about your leadership and how you've been taking on some of the toughest issues. But it's like every 2026 is kind of a split screen. We got that going on, and then we had the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We're recording this on Monday. I got to ask you. Trump called you some pretty disgusting stuff. That's kind of par for him and his kind of leadership. Can I ask you, your reaction now that you've had a little bit of time to ruminate on it? What's your reaction to the nasty stuff and I think just disgusting stuff he said to you and others?
It's not the first time, as you know, that he, personally attacks people. He's attacked me many times before for no particular policy reason. It's usually just he, is attacking my looks or anything physical. And I got to say, honestly, I think it's funny that I live rent free in his head all the time. I mean, he was there pardoning the turkeys, the way they do on Thanksgiving, presidents, and which has nothing to do with me. And there wasn't anything about Chicago or Illinois or me involved, but somehow my name came out of his lips and he was attacking me there. So I don't know. I've gotten used to it. I mean, this is not the way that a president should act. Forget about me. I mean, he talks terribly about so many other people, including our international partners, our allies, not to mention, people across the country, anybody that disagrees with him, really. And I really believe that we've got to get back to a state of, disagreeing without being disagreeable in this country. But unfortunately, he's modeling really bad behavior. And I think you're seeing other elected officials take it up. I'm hoping that when he finally gets off of the landscape of politics or, away from the presidency, that maybe the Republican Party can come back to some, I don't know, reasonable normalcy. Although I don't frankly anticipate that at the moment, but I'm hopeful. I have Republican members of my own family, and we get along just fine even when we disagree. They don't happen to be Trump supporters, but they're also not Democrats. Don't support many Democrats.
Well, I think we're going to need these alternative narratives, especially to the world and to our kids. It'd be nice to be able to let my kids watch the president speak again, but I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and we usually flip the channel when he comes on because he's the anti-role model. We're going to get into that a little bit more coming up, but speaking of kind of crazy and outrageous, I can't have you on the show and not ask you, as a football fan, are the Bears really going to leave Chicago? Because I don't know if you do run for president, I don't know how you're going to get elected for president if they move to Chicago. But are they really going to move to Chicago? What's the latest here as we get into to football season coming up in less than a month?
Well, I'm a Bears fan. I want them to stay in Illinois, and it's a private business. They get to decide whatever they want to decide. But I think that they would like to stay in Illinois. The real question is, how much money are they willing to put up for a stadium? How much money do they want the state to put up for a stadium? They've been reasonably clear about needing infrastructure dollars and so on. But the more, the better for from their perspective. My concern is I got to protect the taxpayers of Illinois. And, building stadiums used to be a thing 30, 50 years ago with taxpayer dollars. These days, when you ask people, do they want to use their taxpayer dollars to pay for a private billionaire-owned team to have a new stadium, their answer is no. Having said that, we all want the Bears to stay. So I've been doing my best to create an environment in which they can. Infrastructure is something we do for all businesses that come to or are in the state of Illinois, making sure we're paving roads for them and underground infrastructure, water, sewer, utilities, and so on. So long story short is, I don't think anybody wants them, honestly, other than maybe the people in Hammond, Indiana, to move to Indiana. And I could certainly say that they would disappoint all of us who have kind of personal equity, so to speak, in the Chicago Bears. If they got up and left, I think they'd lose a lot of their fans, and they don't want to do that. So we're going to work it out, and we're trying to anyway. We need the Bears to do their part.
I appreciate you holding the line. I love Chicago. I've always had respect for the Bears. Love the great state of Illinois. And you're taking the hard route, which you often do. And I think it looks to be the right route for the people you represent. Let's build off of that if we can and get to our top topic. I say a lot, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. I think you've been in a really important leadership position because Trump's on the warpath. He's engaged in what I've called the forever war, from Iran to Venezuela to maybe Cuba. But what's been, I think, underreported is the stateside deployments, the domestic deployments. He extended the National Guard in D.C. through 2029 now. But last year, he federalized, I think, about 300 Illinois National Guard troops, sent in some from Texas, threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act. But you fought him in public and you fought him in court and you won. And I think that was a really important fight for democracy, for our national security, for common sense. But is the fight over? And what does this mean for the rest of the summer? Because he's openly threatening to put more troops into New York, LA, and Chicago specifically. He keeps mentioning Chicago. So, how do you assess the landscape, and what's your strategy to combat that if he tries to do it again?
Well, we're going to stand up and push back like we did before. As you pointed out, we won in the Supreme Court fighting about his wanting to bring National Guard into the city of Chicago. I got to give a little bit of credit to a couple of Republican governors, at least for standing up and pushing back on the idea that, calling out National Guard from Texas, calling out National Guard from California and sending them into the state of Illinois, or even federalizing our National Guard to, stand against the citizens, the people who live here in Illinois, is just wrong. And there were a couple of governors, including one that I just saw this morning at the National Council of State Legislators. His name is Kevin Stitt. He's the governor of Oklahoma. And even though, he and I disagree on a whole lot of issues, that's one area where we do agree, that we don't think the federal government should be calling out troops into our cities or our states unless we ask them to. As governors, we certainly have emergencies that occur where we need help. And that's often when I call out my National Guard. We have a flood or a tornado. There's a lot of devastation, and we need help from our National Guard, or from, they are the military that I get to call out. But I don't want them invading us for purposes other than what is good for the people of our state. Meanwhile, he makes up reasons, Donald Trump does, for why he might want to call out troops. And the Insurrection Act, I just want to warn you and people who are listening, we fought him in court, but and we won. But the Insurrection Act was not invoked. And
right.
According to many of the attorneys that I've talked to, they believe that if he invoked the Insurrection Act, he would succeed in calling out troops into our cities. Now, it would be highly unprecedented to call out troops under the Insurrection Act into our cities, but Donald Trump has done a whole lot of things that are unprecedented, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think there's been a real failure of imagination. And I've often said that I think he intends to attack the elections. He said he's going to attack the elections. I think his recent speech was almost like a case for war against open and free elections. And I think he's, already talked about using the military as plan A, ICE as plan B, and maybe, this January 6th crew of people that he wants to just mobilize in defense of him as plan C. Independent Americans. If you watch or listen to the show, you know the 2026 primaries are taking shape. You also know you can trade on the biggest political races on Kalshi. With Kalshi, you can trade on major primaries, election outcomes, and the biggest political storylines as they happen. And it's primary season, going into the biggest midterms ever. So you can trade on, for example, the Maine Senate election. Graham Plattner is out now. Troy Jackson will be up against Susan Collins. Right now, Susan Collins is trading at 36%, which means a $100 trade would pay out $265.86 if she wins that election, which is right now where I'm putting my money. The big one. Who will be the presidential nominees? On the Democratic side, Gavin Newsom trading at 19%, meaning a $100 wager will earn you out $473.45 if you want to get on the Gavin Newsom bandwagon, or AOC, Rahm Emanuel, Buttigieg, Andy Beshear, Mark Kelly. Who do you think it's going to be? They're all up there. And on the Republican side, JD Vance trading at 40%, meaning a $100 wager will earn you out $239.90 if JD Vance becomes the nominee. Donald Trump Jr. is up there. Donald Trump himself is up there. Tucker Carlson, Ivanka Trump trading at 1.3%. They're all there. And finally, a fun one. Will the U.S. confirm that aliens exist? Because this year, you never know. If you say it's before 2027, there is a 7.2% chance. If you say before 2029, that is trading at 24%, meaning you will earn on a $100 wager $388.29. So you have more money in your pocket when the aliens get here. Look, on Kalshi, you can trade against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. As the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your positions. And for a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use the code INDEPENDENT. That's independent like independent Americans to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, Kalshi, trade on anything. 18 and older, restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Even contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and availability in the markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see Kalshi.com/regulatory. Independent Americans, there is a lot going on, and you can trade on all of it on Kalshi. I think you've been strong at a time when the Democrats have also been very unpopular. Can you talk about, your leadership and even fighting your own party, right? Donald Trump's incredibly unpopular. Democratic brand is more unpopular in some places, but you and others are carving a more moderate path in contrast to the DSA and socialists we're seeing in New York and Seattle and other places. Can you talk about this kind of crisis of identity that's happening in the Democratic Party, and what independents especially should make of it right now?
Yeah, I want to point out, I know your audience is made up of independents and people who are just interested in good government, a government that's effective and delivers. And let me just say that right now the divide in the Democratic Party is not as much a question of DSA versus, I don't know, center left or moderate Democrats. It's less that than it is team cave versus team fight. I mean, you've seen so many people who aren't willing to stand up and push back. And I've heard it directly. I'll tell you a quick story. I called up a couple of governors when the National Guard was going to be called out in Minnesota and Minneapolis, but CBP and ICE were there on the ground. And you remember, I mean, thousands of them, and protesters in the streets, and just terrible things happening. Of course, 2 deaths. We experienced that before Minneapolis did in Chicago, and they moved on from us and went to Minneapolis. But quick story is that during the middle of what was happening in Minneapolis, I called up one of the other prominent governors, and I said, you know what we ought to do? We should ask all of the Democratic governors to go to Minneapolis right now to stand up with the governor of Minnesota and to go out into the street and protest with the protesters and to make a statement that this is not right. This is not the country we want to live in, where they're calling out troops and CBP and ICE and people holding, and carrying automatic weapons on our streets and wearing uniforms. We need to stand with the people of Minneapolis. And that governor said to me, not exaggerating, said to me, I'm really not sure that other governors are going to want to do that. How about if we have a Zoom call? Yeah, a Zoom call. And I thought, really, I mean, you're missing the moment here. This is, I mean, I built a Holocaust museum. If you ask the Holocaust survivors about, the rise of authoritarianism and what we need to do to push back, it's not like, let's wait around and see what happens. So I described that a little bit as Team Cave. By the way, I called another governor at the same time, and that governor said to me, I'm concerned about losing funding from the federal government for my universities if I stand up against Donald Trump. And this is, by the way, this is precisely what they want. They want you to be afraid. They want you to fear that you're going to lose something if you stand up against them. And every day that we're not standing up against Donald Trump and the authoritarianism that he wants to bring on us is another day that they're gaining ground and we are losing ground. So I'm disappointed. But that team cave, team fight, that's the divide, I think, in the Democratic Party. And yeah, people can disagree with, Mamdani or, a member of the DSA, just as others might disagree with somebody who's center left. But I can tell you this, what I found interesting was the day that Mamdani won. You may remember that same night, Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey was on the ballot and she won.
Yep.
And Abigail Spanberger from Virginia, she was on the ballot and she won. And you know what? All three of them, Mamdani, Mikey Sherrill, and Abigail Spanberger, they won running on virtually the same things, which is affordability, helping people pay their rent and pay their electricity bill, and just, making life more livable for people. That's the message that I think wins. And again, we can all disagree about one issue or another, but in the end, if we are standing up and pushing back when they're trying to raise tariffs, when they're trying to make everything more expensive, when he's going to war all over the world and making gas prices go up by $1 or $1.50, I mean, if we're not standing up, pushing back and fighting back and literally delivering for our people, we're getting it wrong. But these folks who are getting elected running on that, by the way, I'm running for reelection. I'm running on that too. I mean, we're the ones who are doing what I think the people of the United States really want, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
I respect your position on that, and I think it's an artful bit of leadership to try to frame it that way, really. And I think you're right. There is a difference between cavers and fighters, and people want fighters, but there's also a big policy difference on issues like Israel, on even socialized medicine, free supermarkets, right? Like I live in New York and I see that, but I also think there was a big difference in the profiles. I mean,
Yeah, but can I push back, Paul? I'm sorry to interrupt.
I can finish, sir. Like there's a big difference between Mikey Sherrill, former helicopter pilot, right, and Abigail Spanberger, who served in the CIA and in the intelligence community, and Mamdani, who's 35 years old and never served in uniform. And I would just say what independents are looking for, especially, is national security credibility. I think so many of us are veterans, right? And I think that's where your party would be smart to lean into those. And you're a populist. You understand how to talk to people of all backgrounds. You are running for reelection. And let me ask if we can pivot into that, because there's an issue that's below the radar, and that's independence. And we say a lot on the show, independents are the future. In Illinois, an independent voter project says they're 41%. Democrats 38% or so, Republicans are 20%. And you've got, open primaries. It's sort of, right? It's better than a closed primary, but voters still have to pick a party ballot rather than voting just for the best candidate, regardless of party. You've been an advocate for democracy. Wes Moore recently spoke out in favor of open primaries. Governor Shapiro did as well. Especially as you run for a reelection and want to attract independents, will you speak out and support open primaries so independents like me and others can have an equal vote and an equal say in our elections?
Well, I think better than that, Paul, would be if we had a national law requiring that we have independent commissions in every state that are drawing the lines, because I'd like to have a competitive race every time between the parties in districts across the United States. That would make for a better country, a better Congress. But I got to say, the Democrats, in fact, our party, were the ones who introduced that idea in 2021 in a bill and passed it with a majority of Democrats. And Republicans, every single one of them, voted against it. So I really do believe, like you believe, that we should have more competitive primaries. general elections. But I think the way to do that is to make sure that we've got literally districts where there's a chance of somebody from either party possibly winning. Now, I just want to push back a little bit, though, on this. You talked about grocery stores that are state created. I just want to point out that there are a lot of areas of my state where it's nearly impossible for a grocery store to get started because it's a rural area or it's an ex-urban area. There, in the immediate area, there may not be capital to do it. It's very expensive to start a grocery store because of all the refrigeration that you need. And what we've done is created what's called a grocery initiative. We don't own the stores. We want private. I was a businessman before I was governor. I want businesses to own and run these things. Government is not good at running a business. But sometimes you need a little bit of help to get started. And so a small business that's starting a grocery store is very valuable, especially where we have grocery deserts across our state. Anyway, I was just pushing back on that one thing.
I think that that's a great example of how you're taking a pragmatic middle approach, right? That's a moderate, measured approach where you take a little bit from both sides and present it in a way that I think appeals to most Americans and probably most folks across Illinois. I think your party's having a hard time doing that with the rise of the extreme left, and the Republicans are having the same problem with the rise of the extreme right. That's why so many people are leaving both parties and declaring their independence. So many young people are unaffiliated. But going back to the open primary piece, I think the federal legislation is overdue and needed. We need the players to stop also being the referees. But we also need the parties to stop running elections when they get public funding, right? Like in all these states, we're putting public money and using public schools and public election booths to run private primaries where all of us can't vote. So that seems inequitable. I mean, we're going to challenge it all the way to the Supreme Court and say it's unconstitutional. But there's a rising movement of folks who want to be able to have essentially an equal vote, right? And until the primaries are truly opened and not run by the parties, we're not going to get that.
Yeah, but I just want to say I'm good with the fact that we have a lot of independents in our country that don't belong to one party or the other, and that it's my job to go win their votes. I've gotten the majority, sometimes super majorities of independents to vote for me. I'm a Democrat, but the truth is that we ought to be able to go win people over who are a little skeptical of both parties, right? And I know that's what you're for too. I just think, it's okay to have these are, you're right, private clubs, the Democratic club, the Republican club, they're private. And if we're not getting it right in the parties, then independents have the ability, in my view, to swing an election or to run candidates of their own. But I will say that at least from my perspective, the task of going and winning over people who maybe don't agree with me on 20 or 30% of things that I stand for, but I've got to go convince them that it's okay to vote for a guy who's 70% with you and 30% maybe not with you, or they could convince me that I got to change my views here and there. I think that's healthy. I agree with you that kind of having only your members of your own party telling the leader or the candidate what they should believe is wrong.
I think there's an interesting thing that's happened in the Democratic Party. You had this kind of arms race to out gerrymander each other, right? And we saw so many folks saying, we want to gerrymander our districts to compete with Trump's gerrymandering. But now there's a different kind of, I think, more strategic, more durable, better for our democracy arms race, where more Democrats are speaking out and saying, I actually support open primaries, truly open primaries, where the parties aren't running them. And I think that the Democrats who do that are going to do better with independents in their state and definitely do better with independents nationally, because we've got a primary problem, right? And the primaries keep putting forward, more and more radical people, but we also don't have an equal say. And I go back to the public funding piece. We're putting in public funds for a private election, which is, I think, un-American and unfair and producing bad results. But maybe I'll take you as a yes on the federal initiative, a TBD on open primaries in Illinois, or a no.
Yeah, and I'll say this, that, that's one of the reasons why I think governors are your best bet. This is not a self-serving statement, I promise. Lots of great governors who are being talked about for 2028, but governors are kind of the best bet for 2028, precisely for one of the reasons that you're raising, which is as governor, you can't just be like an ideologue. You really have to deliver for people. It's not like, well, I have this crazy position, and even though I'm not really delivering it for you, please keep voting for me. I have to actually put programs and implement them in place for people who really need help. The federal government's abandoned us, and so we've got to deliver as governors. And governors are the ones who have to do that, not legislators, not congressmen.
I agree. I think you guys and gals are going to be the most critical leaders, especially as we close this summer and go toward the midterms that he had said he's going to want to disrupt. He's threatened your cities and states specifically. You're going to have to hold the line for democracy, not just for your party or for the people in your state. Sir, let's finish, if we can, with something good. We always do.
Something good, oh, something sweet. Feel the fire.
And I'm so grateful of your time. I got to let you go in a minute here, but we always end with something good. And I'm just going to give a shout out to Rocket City, USA. I'm here in Alabama this week. I'm around NASA, Space City, the place that helps send Americans to the moon. It's innovation, it's unity, it's patriotism. It's really an incredible environment. And they have the best minor league mascot I've ever seen, the Trash Pandas. The Rocket City Trash Pandas, AA affiliate of the Angels that my son and I got to see last night, which was awesome. But it's a really special place. And I think in the midst of so much negativity this summer, I want to always elevate places and people and communities that are doing something good. And if you've never been to Space City, USA, it is something good. All right, Mr. Governor, over to you, sir. What do you got today that's something good?
Well, let me double down on something you said, and then I'll get to my own, which is I'm a space nerd. And so I love that you took your kids there. I mean, I really am a big believer that, we need to be focused on the opportunities that exist in space, the opportunities for our kids to be involved in industry that gets us to space. And I just think it's cool too. So my own thing that I'd like to point out is, one of the things that we weren't successful at in Illinois many years ago is, we really did invent the internet in Illinois. We had the supercomputers at University of Illinois that started the revolution that in the early 90s. But we also invented, it was Mark Andreessen and his team that invented the first graphic browser that allows us all to use the internet. But we didn't hold on to that industry in Illinois back then, and it all moved to Silicon Valley or elsewhere. Today, we have become the central focus of the quantum computing industry, quantum sensing. These are things that are truly going to cure diseases. They're truly going to allow us to protect all of the United States computers from cyber insecurity and the attacks that come from our enemies. And it's going to support not only our military position, but very importantly, our economic position in the world. So I'm really proud of that. And Argonne National Laboratory, Fermilab, University of Chicago, University of Illinois Northwestern, and other institutions here in the Midwest have formed what I think is going to be the Silicon Valley of quantum for the future. So I'm really proud of that, and everything's going great.
Love it. Love it. Great to see your continued leadership and innovation and inspiration. I want to thank you for being a positive role model for our kids. I mean, this is a time that's defining leadership, and you keep rising to the moment. You don't back down. You fight, and you're not an independent. Maybe one day you will be, but in the meantime, you're a guy that we can root for and our kids can look up to. I'm really grateful that you took the time to join us today, Mr. Governor.
Thanks, Paul. Great to see you.
All right, folks, America might be divided more than ever before, but here at Independent Americans, we're working to change that. You saw that today in my conversation here with the governor, adding light to contrast the heat of other shows. If you're now among the 45% of Americans who are independent and rising, including in Illinois and Chicago, this is your show. This is our movement, and our independent movement is bringing hope for the future. Country over party, people over politics. You know the deal. Light over heat, challenging the status quo, and our movement is growing. And hope is the oxygen of our democracy. I hope you felt some of that today with Governor Pritzker. If you did, share it far and wide. Invite others to declare their independence and stay vigilant, my friends, because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And no, you're not alone in your vigilance. We're all vigilant. We're all in this together. Democrats, Republicans, independents, astronauts, everybody else. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. Thank you for tuning in to Independent Americans. My special thanks to Governor Pritzker and his team. I will see you tomorrow. Stay vigilant, America.
He tells me the left and right are dreams for those without a clue. And when you wake, it's time to grow. And it's not cool to believe in school, but if I can say one thing, I've seen the children of the revolution and the good trouble they can bring. He says the red and blue are dead and independent is an attitude. An island in the sea of rhetoric, and I could probably go. He tells me the it's time to grow.
Powered by Righteous Media.